Ahí estamos terminando de configurar. Mientras voy contando de qué se trata la charla, Open Source Tools to Increase Kubernetes Developer Productivity de Kunal Kushwaha. Kunal es Developer Relations Manager at Cibo, estrella de GitHub, fundador de We Make Devs. Inició el grupo oficial de la comunidad de estudiantes nativos de la nube. Un poquito de spoiler de la charla que vamos a estar escuchando. ¿Cuáles son los desafíos que enfrenta la gente con Kubernetes? Introducción a diferentes herramientas, cómo mejorar la productividad y una demostración funcional de lo que estas herramientas pueden hacer. Yo cada vez que escucho Kubernetes pienso plata, es caro. Es lo primero que pienso. Mi DevOps me dice, hagamos Kubernetes, y yo digo, aguantemos un poquito, seguimos con Docker.
Totalmente.
No sé.
Y para los que van llegando y los que ya se acomodaron, recuerden que esta charla va a ser en inglés y tiene traducción simultánea en tu celular. Pueden escanear el QR que está acá atrás nuestro, si lo necesitan.
Sí, y sean buenos con las preguntas que las vamos a traducir en vivo si las hacen en español.
Exacto.
Un tweet porque no tenemos mucho prompt mental ahora para andar traduciéndolas.
Sí, eso también. Para las charlas que vienen que es en inglés, Pablo y yo no tenemos drama en traducir si alguien quiere hacer una pregunta en español, pero ayúdennos con que sea breve y la transcripción simultánea automática.
¿Estamos ok? Buenísimo.
Ya estamos.
Okay.
Perfecto.
We are ready.
We are so ready.
Ok.
Ahora vuelve. Bien, buenísimo. Bueno, Pablo estaba hablando antes un poco del background de Kunal.
Vamos a presentarlo.
Lo presentamos,
Sí.
dale, lo presentamos de nuevo.
De vuelta, es Developer Relations Manager en Cibo, estrella de GitHub y fundador de We Make Devs. Inició el grupo oficial de la comunidad de estudiantes nativos de la nube. Un fuerte aplauso para Kunal. Hi, Kunal.
How's it going? Sorry I don't speak Spanish, but it's been my first time in Latin America, first time in Argentina. So yeah, it's been very good. All right, let me just full screen this. Cool, so my name is Kunal, and I work as Cibo, as a development manager, do a bunch of things. Been involved in open source and communities since I can remember. And yeah, CNCF ambassador, and here to talk about cloud native technologies. So I want to do a little poll. So if you can just go on this page, and you can scan this, and it won't require you to sign up or anything. You can just scan, and we'll be good to go. So my first question is, how many years of experience do you have just reading the crowd? By the way, this is, I think, the biggest audience that I've ever presented at. So a lot of nice people. But yeah. All right, good mix of people. Very nice. See a lot of under 0 to 5. Right, do you use Kubernetes? That's a simple one. Yes, no, again, good mix. All right. And this is a word cloud, so challenges you face when working with Kubernetes. Some people say, oh, too complex. I was just talking to a guy out there, and I was like, do you know about Kubernetes? Like, yeah. Like, do you use it at a company? Like, no, we don't, because the whole ecosystem is pretty complex. There you go. Cost, auto-scaling, RBAC configurations, not knowing what it is, migrating old apps, cool, cost, budget, networking. So a lot of folks are saying that it's complex and very hard, not knowing what it is. All right. I agree, and I faced the same problems when I was started with Kubernetes. So in this session, we'll learn a lot more about onboarding into your cloud-native journey, things to ask yourself, questions to ask yourself. The CNCF landscape, if you don't know what CNCF is, we'll talk about that, and it's good that a lot of folks are beginners. So it's going to be a little cringy, but I have a little animated character, meet Alex. So I didn't realize it was going to be cringy, so please forgive me. But Alex is going to ask us some questions, and we'll try to answer that. So how's it going? Going good? So why should I go cloud native? That's a good question. So there are multiple benefits. If you have your like a dynamic infrastructure, you can scale your applications quickly, pay for what you use. There's flexibility, agility in deployments, optimize cost management with like a pay-as-you-go approach. Someone was mentioning that the cost can be challenging. High availability, ensuring resiliency, streamlining resource management and optimization. Someone mentioned about configuration. So I was just using this other open source tool the other day, Configo. They do configuration as code. So many problems, but people are solving those. Automating DevOps practices, enhancing security, achieving portability across various cloud providers. So the benefits keep going on and on and on and on, as you can see. But we talk about the cloud native approach. The thing that comes to our mind is the CNCF. So raise of hands who knows the CNCF? Okay, a lot of people don't. So CNCF is just it's an organization that was established in 2015 under the Linux Foundation. I'm sure many people know the Linux Foundation. And the whole motivation is to advance the adoption of cloud native and open source technologies. And it provides a vendor-neutral platform for companies to host their projects. So some popular ones are like Kubernetes, which was open sourced by Google. I think it's in 2014. Pretty sure in 2014, Prometheus, Envoys, and all these other projects. So the main reason is when companies put their projects in CNCF, they know okay, there's the company, there's the credibility behind it, there's the whole community behind it. Because we see what happened with Terraform. Terraform changed their licenses, and that is why companies tend to opt for projects that are in the CNCF landscape, which is huge, by the way, because okay, I'm sure that okay, this they adhere to a certain standards, and the licensors they're not allowed to change any licenses, and so many other things. So overall, the CNCF plays a very important role in facilitating the deployment and adoption of these cloud-native technologies, and making it easier for people to embrace the modern cloud-native applications. But if we talk about the landscape is like a map. This is what it looks like. You can see so many projects. So it's not even the complete CNCF landscape. If you go to the website, landscape.cncf.io, you can see it's interactive, so you can scroll down a little bit on the left and do all sorts of things, but it's huge. And it's complex, it's hard to navigate. But essentially what it is, it's a representation of various projects in various domains. So you can see service proxy, storage, container runtimes. There's orchestration tools like Kubernetes is there, security, so on and so forth, CI/CD. So this is the map, and if you're okay, I want to get into this whole cloud native thing, I want to make sure I use all the hot tools that are out there, this is where you go. But the problem that people face is that this landscape is pretty complex. So how do you navigate this landscape is what we'll also look at. All right, so Alex is saying, I got this, no worries. Don't want to read the documentation. It's all right, this is what some people do. And just get on to the coding part. So what Alex is doing here, instead of, let's say, ideally you have a website or a project you want to host, let's say on an infrastructure. So instead of using a well-configured script or like an infrastructure as code tool, Alex is setting up the cluster manually. This means you're just clicking some countless options in the web interface, you're navigating a forest without a map, and the cluster is, let's say, finally up and running, but the adventures are far from over. The first issue arises when you're Alex tries to deploy the company's flagship application. They skip reading the Kubernetes documentation about deployment and service concepts, thinking that, that's fine, who reads the documentation? And just went ahead and created a deployment with the replica count of, let's say, 1,000, believing that it will make the application scale infinitely scalable, and it'll be all good. Not a lot of good choices with that, so messed up. What did Alex do wrong? Can anyone tell? Well, didn't read the documentation, that's first one, and so many alert messages and stuff happening now in the office. And when they said that, okay, the limited cluster resources were stretched to limit as the 1,000 replicas that they set, tried to compete for CPU and memory, and we're like, okay, now the damage has been done, but can we reverse it? No, you cannot scale the application down, damage has been done. So what we learned from this scenario is never skip the basics. There's a whole hype train that comes around. So many new tools keep coming out, and so many new technologies keep coming out. We're like, oh, this is incredible. I'm going to try that. The whole AI thing now, I'm not against AI or anything. No, it's not a hot take. I'm just saying that whenever a new thing comes out and everyone is talking about it, it is much less likely for you to fall in the hype train if you understand the basics. So Alex finally decided to swallow their pride, started reading the Kubernetes documentation, learned about resource limits, replica sets, how to scale applications properly, and slowly and steadily the cluster was stable. All right, the next question is around which cloud provider to choose. I'm not going to name any because it's not fair, but what I would recommend is go for a multi-cloud approach. Anyone here uses a multi-cloud approach? Not many people, so that's good because I can try to share with you why you should. So if you're using a multi-cloud approach, meaning multiple cloud providers, you reduce the vendor lock-in, so you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. It's also very basic beginner question people have when going cloud native, like, okay, which platform do we choose? So I'd say a multi-cloud approach, and you get enhanced reliability and resilience, geographical redundancies, optimization of cost. Some of the services may be like, okay, this provider is offering it much cheaper to me, and I can maybe use this one for this one. Compliance and data sovereignty. Many ISOs and everything have, like, various providers have their own different things, so you can pick the best one for your organization. Innovation and feature access. Some providers have like hundreds and hundreds of features, some don't, so you can pick the right type of provider based on the features that you want. And redundancy for high availability. Risk diversification, so again, not putting all your eggs in one basket. Oftentimes, you can also negotiate prices with like other cloud providers. So like, hey, I'm using this cloud provider, they gave me a little bit of a special discount or whatever, can you do the same thing? And they're like, yeah, if they did it, we can do it as well. So on and so forth. So yeah, vendor negotiation leverage. So many benefits of going multi-cloud, and I think it's good not to put all your eggs in one basket and use various services. Cool, so which services to choose? Again, now serverless is looking pretty cool. We'll talk about the hype train again. So with the serverless thing, let's say Alex went serverless. Let's see what happened. So the thing with serverless, I'm not saying it's not good. That's not what I'm saying. But if it's pretty cool going to be like a deciding factor. So if you see a new tool or something new come in town, and you're like, okay, this is pretty cool, I'm going to use it. I'm going to give a shout out to Kelsey. Hype cycles don't last long when people understand how things work actually, so like the basics, and that's what we're talking about here. But if we talk about the example of serverless and understanding how the hype cycle actually works. So if we talk about serverless, often associated with platforms like AWS Lambda, Azure Functions, Google Cloud Functions. When it first came out, there was like a lot of excitement. And that's where the hype cycle starts. So the initial hype, which is the innovation trigger. So serverless computing, if we take that example, it promised like, okay, elimination of server management, and you can run your code in response to the events, and you don't have to worry about your infrastructure, and okay, pretty revolutionary, and you can abstract away so much of your infrastructure concerns. So initial hype, that's where we happen. That's where we go. After that, peak of inflated expectations. So serverless reaches the peak of inflated expectations as developers and organizations then rush to adopt it, and they were like, okay, it's very cool, new thing in town, we'll adopt it, we'll use it. And there was a belief that serverless would completely replace the traditional application architectures, leading to like cost savings, and then someone mentioned scalability, ease of deployment, so on and so forth. And the next step in the hype cycle is the throw of disillusionment. So when folks started using serverless, and they were like, it's not a silver bullet. Challenges emerged, including increased complexities in managing serverless functions at scale, difficulty with like debugging and monitoring, and concerns about vendor lock-in swept in. So that's that. Next step in the hype cycle is the slope of enlightenment. So during this phase, the developers, they begin to understand like, okay, what we initially thought it was, maybe that's not working, but we realize that it is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So maybe serverless is better suited for event-driven workloads, real-time data processing, and certain type of microservices. Lastly, plateau of productivity. So serverless computing found its niche to become a valuable tool in the Cloud Native Toolkit. Folks learned how to use it effectively alongside other cloud native technologies like containers and Kubernetes. So maybe we can say that it didn't necessarily introduce any groundbreaking inventions, but it represented a significant shift in how developers are thought and managed their applications, and let's say abstracted away a lot of the infrastructure concerns. But if we talk about a more event-driven, event-triggered approach to computing, however, not with its challenges and limitations, which becomes apparent when you scale your applications. So the hype cycle for serverless, nice reminder that new technologies can oftentimes generate excitement, but it's very important to understand and approach it from a clear understanding of what the strength and limitation is in the real world scenario. And yeah, so how can someone not fall for the hype? So now we have the whole AI hype, and hype is not bad. By hype, I mean something that people are talking about. So it's not a bad thing. Like we use AI at our company, and it's all good. But whenever something new comes up, like on Twitter or something, people are talking about it, before you start rushing into it, never skip the basics. Okay, never, ever, ever, don't skip the basics. All right, so if we talk about cloud native, you have your project, you have, let's say, there was a fun question about how do you migrate your existing projects to cloud native. First thing I'd say, when we talk about mapping your cloud native journey is, what happens before you map your cloud native journey? So assessing the organization's needs and goals. So before even you think about like, okay, let's go cloud native, let's do, use all these Kubernetes and the serverless and the autoscalers and everything. Think about what the organization's specific needs and goals are, what your existing infrastructure is, what are the pain points, what are your business objectives, and determine whether you aim to improve, let's say, scalability, reduce operational costs, enhance agility, or just any other strategic outcomes you may have, be that tech or the business side of things. So that's what you do before you embark on your cloud native journey. Next one being choosing the right CNCF projects and tools. I just showed you the landscape, but if you have a clear understanding of your organization's requirements, you can select appropriate CNCF projects and tools that align with your objectives. The landscape is complex, it's huge, but I think that's a good thing because it gives us a benefit of choice. If you look at an example of a dictionary and you're like, okay, give me the definition of objectives. What is the meaning of objectives? So like, okay, I go to O, then I go to B, then I go to J. So that's how you do it. You don't know like, okay, dictionary has 100,000 words. I need to find a definition for objectives. So complex. No. Dictionary is huge, but you know how to navigate it because you know what you're looking for. So instead of just picking some navigating the entire landscape and just be like, okay, so many projects, I'll just pick anything or whatever the hot one is. No. Assess your organization's need and then pick the project. That way, the benefit you're getting is that the complex ecosystem is huge, but it's like a dictionary. So you're working with the projects that benefit you and your requirements. So when we talk about CNCF projects, or projects in general, the evaluating factor, like how do you pick the right project? What is the evaluating factor? I wanted to do a poll on this, but I think we're a little short on time. But ideally, I'd recommend the project maturity. So how mature is the project? So if you don't know, in CNCF organization, a company is like, okay, we have this open source project, CNCF, please take our open source project. CNCF is going to be like, okay, do you follow all the right practices, all the conditions and everything? And they're like, yeah, we do. And then you're in the starting stage, like staging, incubating, then you're like a graduated project. So graduated ones are like the ones at the topmost level, like which have been in the community for a while. So ideally, projects who have been in the ecosystem for a longer time are more stable. And let's say a project that was just in the ecosystem, let's say a week ago, it might not have that much stable APIs or whatever. But think about it, project maturity. Other things you can look at is the community support. So if you're looking for an open source project, how strong is the community, the documentation, the support that they're providing. In addition to that, compatibility with your existing tech stack. So ensure that the choices that you're making can address your immediate needs, but also contribute to your long-term cloud native strategy. That can be a little bit tricky, but we'll talk about it. Like I'll talk about like how do you make sure that a project is not going to go obsolete or deprecated after a few years. But anyway, next up, building a cloud native strategy. So that's part number 3. for mapping your cloud-native journey. So develop a comprehensive cloud-native strategy that outlines the roadmap for, let's say, adoption and implementation, the timeline, your KPIs, your milestones, how to track progress, and also consider factors like training and skill development for your employees if you're going to use an entirely new thing. So that's going to cost that. Security measures, resource allocation, so you're going to use containers, you're going to use some other services, some cloud providers, so how much is that going to cost you, so on and so forth. There are so many projects in the landscape. That is correct. So if we talk about the best practices, when picking a project, I think the number one criteria is security. So ensure security in cloud-native environments and follow the best practices for that. Then the CI/CD, which is also a fundamental practice in cloud-native environments. If you don't already know, it helps enable automated testing, continuous integration of code changes, seamless deployment to production, for example. And you can set up some of the best practices for your CI/CD pipelines that build, test, and deploy code automatically. Robust version control, you can push up like infrastructure as code and do all sorts of things. And managing containers and orchestration, so typically using tools like Kubernetes. Best practices involve using for containerized applications, using container registries, for example, for secure storage, and employing orchestration platform for scaling and load balancing and resource management, so on and so forth. One thing I missed is another really important practice, which is monitoring and logging, because you wouldn't know what is going wrong unless you have like a clear insight. So yeah, some nice projects in the landscape like Prometheus is there, and then you can use other proprietary softwares as well, collect metrics, set up alerts, do all sorts of things. And lastly, compliance with the industry regulations and in the internal governance standards, which is also vital for your organization that is operating in the cloud-native environment. Cool. So how do you evaluate a project viability? So how do you make sure that, okay, the project is like this is a good project and I can pick it, don't have to worry about it. So it can be a little bit challenging, but there are some things you can think of. So project assessment criteria, like I mentioned. Now we're talking about, you have a CNCF landscape, you find some projects, you're like, okay, how do you pick the right project? So project maturity in the landscape, so projects that have been graduated or are in the incubation stage, they tend to have more stable APIs, a broader community support. Speaking of which, community activity, so assess the level of activity that is in the project's community. For example, how frequently they are doing contributions, releases, and the discussions in the mailing lists and the forums. One more thing is end user adoption, so whether the project is adopted well by well-known organizations or whether it aligns well within your industry or your use case. Project fit, so because we mentioned that before you map your cloud-native journey, you think about what are your organization's needs and business needs or technical needs. So if the project aligns with the needs, so choose the projects that directly address these needs rather than selecting tools that are based on the hype. Compatibility, that's another one, so projects that are compatible with your existing technology stacks so that it can be a little bit easier for you to integrate it in your infrastructure. The problem arises, let's say I'm talking about monitoring or logging or something, you find multiple tools that do the same thing. So found multiple projects doing the same thing. Called project overlaps, and it's fine. I think the thing with project overlaps is you have to understand where the projects overlap in terms of whether they overlap in terms of functionality and purpose. So evaluate whether these overlaps are like beneficial, so for example, redundancy or like failover and stuff, or detrimental, so for example, causing confusion or inefficiency. If you find yourself in a place, you find multiple projects doing the same thing, one good tip I can give you is consider the broader ecosystem around the overlapping projects. So sometimes projects will work well together within a specific ecosystem, and that can be specific to what your needs are and what your goals are. Again, not on the basis of hype. So yeah. All right, since you're going to be moving to a new platform, new organization tools and stuff, so resource efficiency. So this can be like evaluating whether your teams has the existing skills and expertise, and if you can choose the right projects that aligns with your team's knowledge, scalability and resource requirements. So what all requirements are needed for the current projects, and if it fits within your infrastructure and budget. And vendor neutrality, that's the most important point. So be cautious of projects that might lock you into a specific vendor's products or services. Essentially, a good practice is choosing projects that promote vendor neutrality and open standards. And the next one is security and compliance. So assess the security features and track record of the projects. And also the project that you have selected complies with the industry regulations and internal compliance requirements as well. Before you pick a project and just push it in production, I'd say conduct POC, which is like a proof of concept. So small scale POCs to evaluate how well the project meets your needs and interacts with your existing infrastructure. And lastly, also like just participate in the community. Oftentimes you just see what the community is trying to show you, but when you actively get involved, for example, it can be like attending meetings, asking questions, even contributing where possible. So it doesn't have to be code contribution, but like just non-code contribution, documentation, just gaining insights. Because when you get involved in a community, so for example, at our company we use K3S, we use Kubeflow. So the employees, they're like, okay, if you want to spend a little bit of your time contributing to these projects, or Kubernetes, for example, K8s, fine, sure, go for it. Lastly, one more thing I want to mention is around long-term viability. So how do you make sure that the project that you have picked is going to be safe if we talk about in the long term? I'd say look at the roadmap. Most of these open source projects, they have like a specific roadmap. What is going to happen in a few months' time? What's the future direction? And see if that aligns with your long-term goals. And always have a backup plan or contingency strategies in case the chosen project is like, okay, now it's being deprecated, we're not using it, or the license has changed or become unsupported. Anything can happen, so always have a backup plan. But ideally, the points that I mentioned, it wouldn't be like if you're using a graduated project. For example, if I take about like an example of Kubernetes, I can say like 100% confidently you can use Kubernetes right now. It wouldn't go deprecated in like 1 year, 2 years, or at least 5 years, for example. How do I know that? Because of all the points that I just mentioned, the community engagement, the end user adoption, the incubation stage in the CNCF landscape. But you have to be a little bit cautious for projects who are just right now new in the landscape. But yeah, again, docs and supports, quality of the documentation, available support, so on and so forth. Lastly, I'll just say, feedback loops. So also establish feedback loops within your organization to continuously see like, okay, we have started using this project, now how is it working? Is it really, do we need to make any adjustments, so on and so forth. So it keeps evolving. Lastly, just the last section of my presentation, that the projects and the CNCF landscape, it keeps evolving. New tools keep coming out. Old tools, becomes deprecated. Some new stuff will come out. If you go to like conferences and stuff, you'll find newer tools are coming out. This is a little bit cringe, but anyway. So I'm going to remove it in future slides. But here's how you do it effectively. So continuously learning and monitoring, attending events like this, like Nerdearla. Events are a great way to be up to date on like what are the new advancements that are happening. You can also subscribe to newsletters, mailing lists, official social media channels of the projects and stuff like that. The community engagement, so actively participating, as I mentioned, attending meetings, and contributing to open source projects by providing feedback. Establishing a risk mitigation plan. So, for example, monitoring the health of your chosen tools and outline the steps to take in case some of these tools become deprecated or unsupported. And it can either be like, okay, if this tool that I'm using right now becomes deprecated, I'll use this another open source project, or I'll use a proprietary software, no problem. Cool. This we talked about earlier, like before adopting a CNCF project, accesses long-term viability by considering factors like community support, project maturity, if the project aligns with the CNCF goals, and embrace standardization. So prioritize tools that adhere to open standards and less likely to that are less likely to become obsolete. I believe all the projects in the CNCF have to follow these standards, so you have to be cautious when you're using proprietary solutions. And then regularly review your tooling stack. We talked about implementing CI/CD already, but lastly, I've mentioned this point already, but I'll mention it again because it's very important when you're mapping your cloud-native journey and picking open source projects, which is vendor-neutral strategy. So when using proprietary tool, please make sure you opt for vendor-neutral configurations wherever possible, and avoid tightly coupling your infrastructure to a specific vendor's technology stack. So utilize open APIs and best practices to maintain flexibility and minimize vendor lock-in. Skill developments we talked about already, and licensing and cost, that's another one. That's good, and it's all right. Thank you.
No, un aplauso para Kunal.
Thank you
If you
so
want to connect
much.
with me on Twitter, it's my Twitter or X, whatever you like to call it.
Kunal, join me over here.
All right.
Yeah, so the camera can get you as a whole.
All right.
Welcome to Nerdearla, Kunal. Is it your first time in Argentina?
First time my flight got cancelled, I was this close to not making it. Then
Oh my God.
Ariel was
Okay.
like on WhatsApp, can you come on Thursday? Can you come on Wednesday? So I was stuck in Barcelona for 2 days, but I made it. But Barcelona is a nice place to be stuck at. It's very good.
All
Nice
right.
beaches.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, it's
So-
very good. It's very nice city. I'm from India. It give me a lot of that feeling, like the houses and stuff, like they've been built here.
And you should see the
Yeah,
city in
it's
summer.
very good.
Like,
Yeah.
it's really, don't come in the summer. Like, just don't.
All right.
Anyways, so we have a few questions over
Yeah.
Swapcard. We're going to start with those. And in the meantime, piensen sus preguntas también. Ahí ya tenemos la primera. Okay, so the first question says, what can you say to a newbie in IT about for motivation, and what things do you recommend to stay away from?
I'd say if you're a newbie, have an open mind, because things keep evolving so rapidly. And if you're in a learning journey right now, I have news for you, that learning never stops. 10 years, 20 years experienced people, they're still learning new things. I mean, Kubernetes is like 2014, and before that you were doing like just bare metal stuff or whatever. And now who knows what will happen after Kubernetes, I don't know. And then, maybe WASM? Anyone using WASM? One guy? Nice. So WASM is new, so it's okay if we don't see many hands. But is WASM like a replacement? I don't know. The ecosystem is small, but I'd say if you're a newbie, keep learning. And what I talked about, the hype cycle, never skip the basics. So things will keep evolving, things will keep changing. Let's say you're doing Kubernetes right now, something else comes up. Web dev, you're doing React or something, and now the bun thing is, I don't know what the bun thing just they launched. So you can see new things keep coming out, but ideally stick to the basics is what I would recommend, and have an open mind. Regarding just getting jobs and stuff, I'd say open source, contribute to open source, because you can contribute to some of the largest projects in the world, and that really shines on your resume. And some of the, like I got my roles, all the jobs I've gotten have been by open source, and all the people who work at big tech companies and stuff, they contribute to open source. So they're like, okay, I worked with this guy, he was contributing this project, so yeah.
Keep a newbie state of mind, right?
Yeah.
Forever and ever.
Always, yeah.
Cool. Oh, okay. So do we have questions from the audience over there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Lionel,
No.
hang on. Perdón, espera que prendan el micrófono. Okay, so while we wait for that, I have another question from Swapcard that says... No question from Swapcard. Lionel?
Almost.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lionel. I'm part of a very hype team, and this was useful because now I will want to slow the pace. And after hearing you speaking about specific actions, I thought about 3 strategies and want to know what you think about them. First one will be writing down the specific goals and problematics. Second one is showing them your video. Third one will be maybe bombarding them with the lot of options you showed in order to say them, oh, why not pick this instead of that? Can you help me adding some more? Thank you.
I didn't get most of it. Sorry.
Okay, so we need to... Lionel, en español, contame.
De lo que él dijo,
Sí.
parte de un equipo que quiere hacer todo ya, estrategias para que no nos mandemos hacia lo loco. Que se le
Okay,
ocurra.
so he's part of a small team and they're trying to execute a strategy. What's your advice and what potential roadblocks do you see ahead implementing
How to survive.
this technology? How to survive?
Yeah, I'd say look at, first of all, case studies. One of the best ways to do is like how other people did it. So that's one. When you're adopting a new project, as I mentioned, thinking about the long-term viability and whether it works well with your existing tech stack. Sometimes it's okay to make compromises. So like, okay, something like, okay, this tool is like really, okay, very next level, and there's another one that does a similar thing. But you're like, we want to use this, but it doesn't fit well with your current tech stack. So I think ideally, before you even map your journey, think about what your goals are, be that technical and business goals. That's first thing, before you even map your journey. After that, you see what all resources you have available, and don't pick the best one. Like I don't, like your users don't care about what you're using. Your users don't care if you're using Kubernetes. Your users don't care if you're, what your code standards, whatever you are. They just care about the user experience. So I'd say, think about it. Like don't strive for perfection when you're when you're just mapping your journey, but try to find something that can benefit your short-term goals and also provide a long-term viability. And then once you have that established, then you can make changes or improve upon it. But don't fall for the hype and just pick the best stuff that may not work with the existing stuff you have. You also have to think about your existing your employees and stuff who will have to go under the skill development to because Kubernetes is complex. So if you have never used Kubernetes, it's going to be like you're going to be busy. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Lionel. Espero haber traducido.
Hi, Kunal. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you. Can't see you, but anyway.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
My question is, what are some of the best cloud-native tools that you think that are solid in terms of community support and community building, and which are growing faster?
I believe, chaos engineering is getting popular. Seen that. WASM is another one. The WASM ecosystem. The CNCF recently did a WASM-specific event, so obviously they're putting money in this as well. I think if an area you have to look at is WASM. One more thing I'd say is Kubeflow for MLOps. I think that's also a good engaging community. But ideally, all the projects that are graduated and incubating, they are pretty active, and they are the community is very active, and they're the future looks good for them. But it's the initial ones, just in the staging, the ones you have to really keep an eye out on, because it's not easy for the projects as well. Because the CNCF is very strict. Okay, you're in the stage number 1, stage number 2, and then last stage graduated. So it takes a lot of time. So maintainers don't want to lose all that, the work that they have done. So I'd say that any project you can find who's graduated and stuff, like Prometheus or whatever, like Kubernetes, yeah, they're very active. But the ecosystem to look at, I think WASM will be very nice. I'm excited about that, and the whole MLOps stuff that is happening. But yeah, that's true. And chaos engineering is interesting. Anyone using chaos testing? No? Okay, no worries. Try it out soon. Yeah. Spotify, I think they introduced it first, but no, it's good. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any more questions off the floor? If not, I can read from our virtual audience.
I have one.
You have one?
Yeah.
Come right after this one. Because Guido is asking, what are the cons of implementing multi-cloud?
A con of implementing multi-cloud. Networking can get a little challenging. If you have too many microservices in multiple providers, then communicating with those, it can get a little bit overwhelming to track. But there are open source projects that help with that. But from what I have seen, in terms of challenges for multi-cloud, the people say that it can get a bit complex in terms of how you have a pod in one service, you have another pod in a service. How is this communicating with each other? But there's an open source project, KubeSlice. When I go to conferences, I only share open source tools. So there's an open source project, KubeSlice, that helps with multi-cloud management. You can try it out. Whoever asked that question.
Awesome. Okay, Pablo, your question now. Or do we have someone over here? We're really shy, but no, over there. Look at that, a question.
Hi. I wanted to ask you, you were referring to chaos engineering. Is it Chaos Monkey? Has anything to do with that? What is chaos engineering?
Chaos engineering is testing, emulating production environments to test, so testing in production, if you will. Not many people have adopted it yet, but yeah, essentially you test in production, you have a backup plan in case things go wrong, but rather than in a dedicated environment, it's just okay, you're testing in production, but in a controlled environment. So it's not something goes wrong, then production goes down. But what would happen if whatever you have just deployed of stuff, if that was in production, how would the platform React. It's a more advanced level of like stress testing or whatever. Yeah, but yeah, essentially in simple terms, testing in production, you can say.
Okay, we have time for one more question over there.
Hello, my name is Luis. Regarding the previous question, what's the difference?
Louder.
Can't hear you.
Más alto. Habla
Sorry,
más alto.
yes. What's the difference? I'm not sure if I understand all the concepts, but what's the difference between a classic A/B testing where you make a change and so only some part of the people have to see that change? O sea,
No, can't hear them.
Okay, so
sorry.
habla un poco más fuerte.
Yes,
Más fuerte.
sorry.
Ahí va.
Oh, now I can hear
Sí,
you.
me gusta.
Yeah.
What's the difference with the what I know like A/B testing? Okay, do you understand? It's clear
We
my
don't
question?
have much
Sorry.
time.
No.
No,
Well,
I
maybe
don't
you,
understand.
maybe
In
But
Spanish.
I'm gonna be here. Yeah, it's fine. You
nos
can.
quedamos sin tiempo.
Yeah, yeah.
Never
Nos
mind,
quedamos-
sorry.
we're out of
I'm
time.
here
Later
in
on,
the
later
conference. Yeah.
Le podés,
I'm gonna
lo
be
podés
around
buscar a
here, yeah.
Kunal después si le preguntás en vivo. Nos quedamos sin tiempo, mil perdones.
Thank you so much.
Pablo.
Oh, thank you so much. Very,
Thank you
very
so much.
nice.
Un
Very
aplauso
nice
para
conference.
Kunal, por